Are recording. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Agree or Disagree, the podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE. You can subscribe to my podcast, our podcast, at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or go on the website, kevinolenek.com. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. Like Agree or Disagree, the podcast on Facebook. Follow also on Instagram at KEVOLE. And it was long considered the most divisive, polarizing, angry, toxic election campaign, maybe not only in the history of Alberta, but maybe possibly one of the most toxic in Canada's history. The Alberta election ended 1 week ago with a United Conservative Party victory. Jason Kenney won in a majority. It took 36 minutes for a news station to declare first that the UCP would win, the exact same time that the NDP were declared victors 4 years ago. So what went right for the UCP? Why did Deirdre and I be so wrong in our predictions? What is the first 100 days going to look like? What is the conversation going forward? And what does this mean for both the conservative movement, the progressive movement, and in a bigger picture, the federal election? I am joined, of course, from the Political R&D podcast and a whole bunch of other things. Joining me again, is Deirdre Mitchell McLean. A countless amount of things that you do. How are you doing?
I'm well, Kevin. How are you?
Great. And joining us for the first time on this one, although she has been on the podcast before, Kristin Raworth, causing some stir on social media a little bit, which is great. Thank you as well for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I think this will be very interesting. Because we have, I predicted an NDP minority. I was really wrong. Deirdre, you picked an NDP majority, did you not?
Very possibly.
Yeah, you can't remember. It's like, oh, that was a long time ago.
I know it was wrong.
Yeah.
I know it was wrong, and I will say that I was basing it on the 2012 election. Right, that switched for the Wildrose in the last 3 days before the election. I actually thought that there might be a point where people said, this is too much.
Okay, so
that's what I was looking at, but also feelings.
Fair enough. So, Kristin, we have not heard from you, so I'm going to give you the floor first. In your opinion, why did the UCP win, and why were we so wrong?
Well, the first thing I want to point out is that I'm really excited that for the first time in a lot of podcasts that I've heard, the two guests you have on are women. They're women with strong opinions on both sides and across the board. And I think that's a really important thing just to highlight right out of the board.
Oh.
So I think that's very important. So thank you for having two strong-willed women on your podcast.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Secondly, I think that it was pretty clear from the time that unity came into effect, from the time that the United Conservative Party came into effect, that the NDP were concerned about the impact that they could have, that the United Conservative Party were basically running to lose. They were in a position where all polling showed from the minute that unity was announced to the second that they won the election that they were really in a position where it was theirs to lose. And if you look at some of the ridings in Edmonton, especially the ridings kind of in the Ring Road area around Edmonton, they did lose seats as a result of potentially some of the more socially divisive things that came out. But I think this was always going to be what was going to happen. And the NDP did not do themselves any favors, in my mind, by running an incredibly negative campaign, by not talking about their own platform. The best speech that Notley gave this entire election was her concession speech. And I say that because that was the first time I heard her speak about what they wanted to do in a very, very, very positive way, and not mention Jason Kenney once. They should have done that from the get-go.
That would have been nice.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Deirdre, your thoughts?
My thoughts on, I think it's a fairly universal opinion, actually, that the NDP they ran like they were running they campaigned like they were running for opposition. It was nightmarish. And, the negative campaigning, now, granted, it might have been Rick Bell, who would never say anything positive about anyone other than Kenny, but he wrote something after Kenny and Notley met to talk about the transition of power or transition of government, whatever it is. There was something that I believe it was him that said something about the negativity sticking to Rachel Notley even after the campaign. Like that's the effect that this campaign had. It was so negative. One of the other things that we were talking about last night actually was how I found it difficult to disconnect between the Alberta NDP website and the Twitter accounts and the Alberta government. So when the accounts were tweeting out like really negative things, to me it just made me cringe. I didn't feel like it didn't sound like it was coming from government, and if it was coming from government, it was wrong to be coming from government. So this, it was an extremely negative campaign. Jason Kenney still managed to control the message, though, by doing the Facebook Live events and turning them off as soon as reporters started asking questions, because the reporters weren't asking about his platform announcements.
And I think, too, just to interject here, that Rachel Notley and the NDP forgot why they won in 2015. They didn't win because they didn't go at Jim Prentice extremely hard. They didn't attack him. They didn't call him names. They didn't have 5 million websites, the truth about Jim Prentice. They won that election because they were positive, because they gave Albertans something to believe in. And that's what people wanted, and that's what the NDP this time around failed to deliver on. And I think they believed that by running this campaign that they would turn enough people against Jason Kenney and the UCP that they could win votes, but they forget that people want to vote for something. They want to vote for something that they can believe in and trust. And even in the leaders' debate, you didn't see Notley speak about anything with the exception of briefly talking about their diversification. She didn't even talk about the $25 a day daycare platform promise, which was the biggest thing that she could have possibly done and would have made a huge difference for a lot of people in Alberta, and she never spoke about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll read what Rick Bell started with here, because we're just referring this, but it's, look in the mirror. Yes, you and the NDP. Your campaign didn't work. People weren't listening. You were told, and the NDP sympathizers in the self-styled smart set were told. People weren't listening. This vote is a slap in the face to all those, including many in the out-of-touch chattering classes, who misread what Albertans wanted. You and the NDP thought it was far better to make a campaign about sliming Jason Kenney than talking about your plan and what you would do. I feel like he's mirroring pretty much what you guys are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And
like I said, I think it's a pretty universal opinion that it was just a horrible campaign.
From the NDP, one of the things that the NDP was responding to, and even Rachel Notley responded to when Rob Breckenridge questioned her about the negative campaign, is that they were stating It's not negative campaigning if we are stating facts. How would you respond to that?
I'll go first. I think, fair enough in terms of some of the stuff that they brought to bear. I understand why. But at the end of the day, they never spoke about what they wanted to do. Ever. Like, even watching the leadership debate, I had a friend of mine from Ottawa who I was, texting with the whole time, and he said, I don't understand what Rachel Notley wants to do. And this was someone who's very left-leaning, who, if he lived in Alberta, would absolutely vote for Rachel Notley. And he was watching that wondering, I don't understand what their platform is. So there's negative campaigning, there's commenting on what someone else against you is going to do, and then there is failing to enunciate what you are going to do. And the other part of that is, even before the election was called, they launched not one, not two, but 3 anti-Jason Kenney websites. They put, I think their hatred for Jason Kenney took over their sense of what people want and what the electorate wanted to hear and what got them there in the first place. The whole reason why Rachel Notley won in the first place, and I remember this as somebody who voted for them in 2015, is that they provided you hope and optimism, and we're going to do things differently, and we're going to be positive, and we're going to go out there and talk about our message and make lives better for Albertans. I not once, other than, again, the childcare announcement, heard what they actually wanted to do to make lives better. I heard what they had done a million times over, but not what was going to happen next.
Yeah, you're going to have to change this episode to the Agree podcast. Because it's, I fully agree. They had opportunities to put forth their own vision, but then, I don't believe that Jason Kenney put forth a fantastic vision for the province, but no one really did. And I think that was a failure of all of the campaigns. And so when Jason Kenney was literally speaking their language and talking about what people wanted to hear about, that resonated more than anything else.
A couple of things that I'm going to, just from my perspective, that I observed that, and I also heard, and I'm going to probably push a little bit of a hornet's nest what I'm about to talk about, but I did hear this, and it was on specific. There were, to precurse what I'm about to say, there were some really disastrous candidate selection issues. I don't think that there's anybody from here that will necessarily disagree with. But I think one of the things that really that really frustrated me is, and I want to use specifically Jeremy Wong as an example of taking a Bible verse that not only religious Christians or Catholics have used in a wedding ceremony, but outside religious people have used in a wedding ceremony, and demand that he apologize for speaking about a topic in church in a minute 26 clip. I think that really offended a lot of people, about just in the sense that, I'm not coming out here to say, the Christians were persecuted. That's not what I'm saying. But it was just the speaking. It sort of felt to me in some ways that the NDP were thinking that they were the better human beings. We knew what was right. We are going to focus on language, and we're the people of love. And this group of UCP people, whoever Jason Kenney's bringing out, their outdated ideas are just not going to work. They're not part of our Alberta. And it sort of felt a little bit snobby, and I wonder how much that turned a lot of people off. Because they just kept on and on and on. And as Jen Gerson wrote, they couldn't find a difference between one that was completely significant, and one that was like a minor issue. They all bunched it in together, and I think it turned a lot of people off.
Oh, for sure. It did feel, Press Progress. They did some amazing reporting. They dug up a lot of things. Some of those things that they did dig up were worthwhile. Were things that I think that people want to know about. But some of them, it just felt like they were grasping at absolutely anything. And you're right, there was definitely a disconnect between something that matters a lot and something that really doesn't. It was almost like they weren't even certain of their own narrative to a point. Just they're all bad.
Yeah.
It
was basically, I think, just searching for the lake of fire moment. Like everybody, this entire election was searching for that moment where things switch. Because I remember the 2012 election so incredibly well, where not only did we get that lake of fire moment, but then we got these videos that people were posting to YouTube saying, I've never voted PC, but I'm going to vote BC now because I'm afraid. And it became a whole movement. Danielle Smith, up until about a week before that election, was almost guaranteed to win. Yeah. And then she didn't. And I think that people were searching for that. But I think what people don't understand that is in 2012, we were also in an economically more secure environment. So people had the, for lack of a better word, sort of ability to care about these things as number one voting issues. When now, in 2019, what we're talking about, a lot of people who've lost their jobs, a lot of people who are economically insecure, a lot of people who are upset. And for them, being able to take care of their family is their number one priority. They don't have, for them, the luxury of being able to care about these things. And that's where I think the NDP kind of went wrong, is that they didn't understand that thing and they couldn't speak to economic insecurity within this province because they kept saying that we're getting better, everything's fine, and it wasn't fine for a lot of people. And those are the people who I think got out and voted because they weren't happy. And again, it's not to say that those things don't matter and what happened doesn't matter, but it was fundamentally misunderstanding the electorate.
And I think as well, you've got to look at 2018 and the sheer overwhelming number of potential lake of fire moments that they had.
Yes.
I looked at it during 2018 and I thought, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if this is purposeful. Because seriously, how can that not be purposeful? The number of candidates that they had with these anti-immigrant backgrounds, anti-LGBTQ, like so many. And I honestly thought that it was purposefully done to desensitize so that they wouldn't be able to have that lake of fire moment at the end.
That they were already a lake of fire.
Right. Like it was constant from the May 6th UCP convention. It just never stopped. It was constant all year long. And it had the effect of desensitizing everyone to these gotcha moments because we've been listening to it for a year.
Well, and just strategically building off of that, like they made a mistake. They should have waited. They should have waited and just dropped everything.
Yeah.
And the other ironic thing about this is that if you look at two of the major ones, we're talking about Caitlin Ford and Eva Kariakis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
I think you are, yes.
Those were two people who were outed by conservatives.
Yeah.
They weren't outed by the left. They were outed because of internal party politics and one person who's a crazy lunatic human being. So that's another big part of this to understand is that you had all of this other stuff going on as to why these people were outed. This wasn't a movement, not like a fire. It was somebody who saw this from the opposite side, thought it was wrong, and outed it to a journalist. That's what happened there. This has been completely different. But it's also been just, I think that one of the things that I am worried about, not necessarily obviously as it relates to people posting things that are terrible, but when you talk to new people who want to run and they look at their social media, how are we building a place where we are going to ask young people to be politically engaged? And then we're basically also asking them to sit on everything they've ever said that could potentially be bad. And that's what we've done this election season. Everything you've ever said, every meme you've ever liked, anything you even liked by mistake. Like, I've had so many people message me and say, like, I don't know what I've said. Like, I don't know what I've done. And it's not because they actually believe any of these things or they're bad people. It's because it's very, very difficult as a candidate, as anybody who enters social life, to then realize that your entire, because our lives as people in their 30s is on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we make it very much more difficult for good people to want to engage in that process when we are mining their social media for anything they could have ever possibly done or said that was offensive.
Well, as an example, I mean, there's a picture of me out there with standing beside Doug Ford, because I went to Toronto to try to understand why Rob Ford was so popular. So I went to a Rob Ford campaign because I was like, I'm trying to understand why. So there's a picture of me with Doug Ford. Now some media people will say, obviously, this guy's a Doug Ford supporter because there's a picture out there. And then, and there was Nicole, I want to say Nicole Williams, is that the right name? That was caught with the soldiers of Olden.
Yeah, West Henry.
Yeah.
So I would not refer to her as someone compared to the soldiers of Odin. That was not on Nicole, but go on.
No, but where I'm going with is just is the opportunity to take a picture, post it, and say, obviously you're on this person's side because you're taking a picture with them, and I know that I'm not going to mention anybody's name here, but I do know that someone on Twitter is making a lot of hay doing this, and I don't feel that it's a genuine way to prove anything.
Well, it goes back to, for me, the way that we treated Deb Drever when she came in as an NDP MLA. And she was, like, I think 19 years old and took some ridiculous photos. And she was made to sit as an independent for almost a year while she built what ultimately became Bill 22, which was helping women leave their leases if they are in situations of domestic violence. And the way we treated her was ridiculous. Because at the end of the day, she was a kid, like a lot of people were when they were elected to the legislature in 2015. She has things online, and she was treated fundamentally differently. And in my opinion, she was treated fundamentally differently because she was a woman. And that is ultimately what we tend to do, is we judge women for these things that they've done, that we don't necessarily treat men the same way.
Because boys will be boys, but
exactly, locker room talk.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think you're it's on both sides. I mean, I know that Leela here took a lot of heat. I know that I heard through the grapevine she took a lot of personal heat for some of the stuff that she was saying. That wasn't necessarily on social media, but she was facing some backlash. There was there is conservative women taking a lot of heat, and we're not talking about that as much as we should. But it is interesting who is being targeted, and I'm speaking that in a nonpartisan way. But I do think that it's important to say, like, why is a woman's past an opportunity to take advantage when men have made the same thing? I mean, we have a former premier that stood in front of a media camera and gave everybody the finger, and we applauded that. We called him a champion.
Well, and I'm not going to defend what she said in any way, shape, or form. But I think what's important to understand, for example, with the Caitlin Ford situation, she was being stalked to the point where she had to call the police. This man was breaking into her home. He was stalking her. If that was the other way around, if that was a man who was in that position and that was happening with a woman, I don't think we would have responded the same way. Again, I'm not in any way excusing what she said, but this guy went out of his way to destroy her.
Yeah.
And a lot of people stood around and thought, this is great, this is fantastic, because she's this and she's that, and we haven't seen the context of the conversations, but let's blame her for this. When she is being stalked to the point of having to have police come in and get an emergency protection order because this guy is abusing and assaulting her, we need to have a conversation about how we discuss that and how we talk about that, because media outlets seem to be very, very open to this guy talking to them because he was slamming someone who was a conservative. And fine, fair enough, but at the same time, this guy is awful and a predator, and so we need to really be careful about the way we have these conversations, because if we're going to allow anybody who does that to be legitimized in our media because he's going after somebody we don't like, that's not the kind of conversation we want to have around women in politics at all.
I totally understand and agree. Deirdre, what do you think?
I will say that it was one of the things with Caitlin Ford and Eva Kyriakos stepping down immediately. Like, it was absolutely immediate. And looking at Mark Smith, and I realized, yes, it was an easy UCP riding. They couldn't replace him. But, you know, I don't, like, they're all bad things that were associated with these candidates, but that one got to stay. That one was defended. That did not sit well with me, because now I'm not sure. It might also be the case that both Eva and Caitlin Ford honestly decided to step down on their own, said, I do not want this to stick to me. I mean, look at Jeff Callaway. You can't Google Jeff Callaway without Kamikaze campaign coming up. So there's a possibility that they had a much better understanding of how this type of a controversy could stick to them, and that they just said, no way, I'm not doing this. But if that's not the case, and they were asked to step down, I find that very bothersome when, Mark Smith gets a nod from the leader.
I know from the interview that everyone, the controversial interview that Danielle Smith did with Caitlin Ford, according to Caitlin Ford, she chose to step down. As soon as this came out, she decided that she would step down and try to defend this. Now, I think, I personally, in my opinion, I think one of Caitlin Ford's biggest, well, there's a number of them, that whole situation is a mess, but I don't think that she should have went to the media. I think that I understood why she went to the media, but I think she probably just sort of, for now, at this point in time, during the campaign, I think it might have been better to just wait, let the dust settle, and then come out a little bit later in this, because that's just my personal opinion. But I know I'm
going to challenge that. So again, not supporting the things that Caitlin Ford said, but
I'm not agreeing with the things Caitlin Ford said either. By the way, let me be very clear on that.
But at the end of the day, we give space to men to come out and defend themselves consistently. Like when it comes to, for example, with Tony Clement and his weird, I don't even know, his photo sharing with I don't know what he him space immediately to defend himself. So at what point do we need to start having a conversation about why we don't give women the same rules, the same options? I am not going to sit here and defend anything that she said. I don't know the context, but I do not agree with the things that came out of her mouth. But if she is saying that somebody who was harassing her for over a year did this, why do we not give her the same space as we do to Tony Clement to bitch about how he was like attacked by Nigerians online to send him naked photos? We give him a hell of a lot more space to do that when it has been proved again and again and again by women online that this is a consistent thing that he does, that he has consistently harassed women across the board, but we do not give Caitlin Ford, or Danielle Smith for that matter, the space to have that conversation. We need to be consistent in the way that we address this stuff, and we only do it for men. We only allow men this forgiveness tour. We don't do it for women.
The reason I agree with you that in terms of the space, you're right. But in terms of, I think what Danielle Smith said at the beginning, and people, there was a campaign to get Danielle Smith fired on that. And Danielle Smith specifically said it. I don't think it was very wise for you at this point in time to come out and defend, because I think it gave an opportunity for the opponent to take her message out of context, unfortunately. And I agree with you fully. She should have the right to come out and absolutely defend herself. And I had no problem. I understood the critiques of the interview, but I had no problem that the interview actually happened. But I think just from a strategic place, it might have been better to wait a little bit and say, okay, now I'll come out and we'll talk about this. And I also say this from a place of myself being at times feeling emotional about being attacked. When I'm attacked and I'm feeling emotional, if I lash out, there's things I'm going to be missing. And it partially came across a little bit that Caitlin Ford was justifying her actions. Mm-hmm. And I think that part, that is where I think a couple of months away, sit back, what did you say? What exactly did you say in this conversation? Even though it was a private conversation, what could you have said better? May have presented itself as, oh, okay, I have learned from this.
Okay, so I'm just going to interject, and again, then I'll stop. As somebody who had my experience basically put everywhere on Canadian media, I know what it's like to have what you feel, what you think, what you say completely treated wrongly by the media and put yourself in a position where people are saying things about you that aren't true. And what you feel like, again, in that moment, and I don't know her, I don't know what she thought, but I know what it's like, and you are so upset and you just want people to understand you. You just want people to understand that you don't think that way, that you are different, that you don't believe that. And maybe I'm off base, maybe I'm just personalizing this too much, but for me, sometimes I respond to people that I don't even know online about what happened to me to try to get them to understand the perspective that I'm coming from and why I'm saying what I'm saying. Because for people to believe that you are bad or awful or you think certain ways when that's not who you are, that's an incredibly difficult thing. And you want so much to make people understand how you think. So I get where she came from in doing that interview. I understand.
Totally.
I get where she came from in everything she's done since then. If she legitimately doesn't believe the things that she said, because it's hard. It's very, very difficult. Because it's easy to say, like, sit back and don't let that bug you, but it bothers you.
Yes.
Every day it bothers you. I try not to be one of those people who lets social media bug me, but I'm still also that, like, fat like kid with no friends from like grade 5. And every time people are mean to me on social media, I kind of go back to that place a little bit. And so I think we all have that in us. So I can understand to a point where she was coming from in doing that interview, because you just want people to understand who you are.
Yeah, I totally get. I'm with you on that. I understand that. And one of the things I do respect about you is I think that you try to bring nuance to a very difficult platform, which is Twitter, which is not interested in, at times not interested in nuance and balance. They're just interested in their own voice at times, and I respect that. And
that's such a shocking statement.
Yeah, I know. But that's just, I totally get why she did it, and I do have to tell you, I did some digging, and I myself couldn't find anything that showed a history that Caitlin Ford was this way. Myself, when I dug, but that's all I'm going to say. But I am again not endorsing what she said, and I don't think anyone is. We are not endorsing what she said. I think we're talking about just the opportunity to give her space to explain what she said.
So I guess my last point on this is, if we're going to be angry about what she said and the way that she said it, and fair enough, let's also be angry about the man who stalked her for years, who made her feel afraid, who leaked this stuff to hurt her, who did all of this because he is angry that she won't be with him. Like, let's all just please focus that as well. Like, be mad about everything else, but be mad about that too, because this man is a complete monster. And what he has done, not just to her, but to very many people, is something that we need to have a conversation about.
And that happened to even Kyriakos as well. I don't think it was not the same man, but my understanding of that...
No, it wasn't the same guy.
Yeah, it was. My understanding, though, was, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is someone threatened her as well. She did get a threatening message from her.
I don't remember if it was that. The way that she had said that it was going to be released is that someone threatened to release it, but what it seemed to be was media had these posts and they basically contacted her.
Yeah, I think it was Press Progress who had it.
Yeah, so I don't know that it was that was how she characterized it, but I'm not sure that it was. We're definitely talking about completely different levels between what Caitlin Ford was saying and what, because I don't believe. Yeah, I think it was just smooth communications on Kyriakos' part, rather than actual fear for
her safety. Yeah,
right. Like I think it was just good communications. Strategic communications. Yeah.
So let's get into Mark Smith before we move on to a couple of other things here, because I do think that this is also a very important conversation that this has led us to. The expectation pre all of this was he was going to be the education minister. I think that we can conclude that he's not going to be the education minister. I think that's, thank you, Captain Obvious. But how long is he going? What do you think is going to happen to Mark Smith?
That's kind of a tough call because, I mean, can he put a little bit on the line by standing up for him? I don't know if he's going to be asked to backbench and just kind of stay out of the way. It's possible. They have a large enough caucus. And, there's a part of me that thought at one point that he would face a nomination contest in 2023 and he will not win. So that was something that I did think. But honestly, it's tough to say. I really hope that there is no way that Mark Smith could become education minister. You know, Jason Kenney has done a complete about-face since he won the election. And, you know, the campaign Kenney, I think, may have said, you know, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So far, Premier Designate Kenney, I don't think would risk that.
I think that the other part of this is that, from what I understand, is that the party feels that Mark Smith's comments cost them votes. It cost them Edmonton West 10 Day, as an example. They very much believe that Nicole Williams lost because of Mark Smith. So there is very little appetite within the party to give him any kind of role. And it's not because necessarily they feel that he hasn't earned it, regardless of the GSA or perspective. Like, he did his job. I think that they're just done. They're done, and they're angry, and he has cost them votes. So I don't believe for a second that he will get anything. I think he will be backbenched, and I think that in 2023 they will make sure that his vote is contested.
Yeah.
There's a guy in Edmonton that I would love to see be able to run there, but a friend of ours that got kind of a little bit shafted, let's just say, and the guy that replaced him didn't win that seat, so that was interesting enough.
Yes, actually, that was sweet justice.
Yes.
That was 100%.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Let's go back to the future of rate. Let's talk a little bit about Notley, and then I want to get into what happened with the Alberta Party here. How long are we expecting her to stay? Do you think she stays the full time as opposition leader?
Yes.
No.
Oh, great.
We agree.
There you go. We finally disagreed, Deidre. Go.
No, I don't. I absolutely expect her to stick around unless she is convinced to run federally. I don't believe that is on her agenda, although I would have absolutely nothing that, you know, backs that up. But unless she goes federally, I see her sticking around 100% to run again.
My perspective is that I think that she sees, like, Emma Strathcona is always going to be a safe seat provincially for the NDP, always. And I think that she understands that for a party to continue moving on and to grow, it needs new leadership. They got to government through her. I think that by the next 4 years, she's going to try to find somebody else within the party to lead it, which I would assume at this point would be Sarah Hoffman. There are options. They have strong people within the opposition, and that's how you run it. That's how you run the next campaign. So I think that she'll be done by this time in 4 years.
Okay, so let's throw a couple of ideas out here. Let's say the NDP does not do well under Jagmeet Singh. Do you see Notley in a leadership role, running for leader?
I would love to see her running for a leadership role. I think that she could pick up where Jack Layton left off.
I agree with Deirdre there completely. Like, I would love to see that. I just don't know if that's where the party wants to go. If you look at people like Nikki Ashton and people who are leaders within that party right now, they are very, very anti-pipeline.
Yeah.
I have a hard time understanding how Notley comes into that and how she navigates that.
She sells memberships and she takes over the party.
Yeah, that's true.
Because honestly, I think, like, where the NDP has gone, you know, since 2015, since they announced, and, you know, this just makes me want to spit what the federal party has put Rachel Notley through over these last 4 years. But from Leap Manifesto,
Ugh.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, but they have decided, okay, we're going to apparently challenge the Greens for their votes. So way to strategize people. But that is not the winning path for a federal party to ever get government.
And that's true. I think that Rachel Notley is more of a Jack Layton-esque leader. And Jack Layton, I remember I was watching Rachel Notley's speech when she declared that the election was on, and she basically gave the lend us your votes speech, which was what gave Jack Layton the opposition vote. And I mean, I think all the time what could have happened if he was still around.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that Notley could do that. I just don't know if she wants to. I think she's probably very tired. Like, I would imagine she's exhausted. And that this probably isn't the time for her to do that because she's tired. And there are a lot of people waiting in the wings of the federal NDP party who didn't run last time, just like with the Conservative Party, who didn't run last time because they thought that it would be a Justin Trudeau majority government. So they sat it out. So it'll be interesting to see, because I think that this next election, after this one that we have in October, is where you see the heavy hitters finally coming out.
We'll get to federally, but one of my bold predictions is I possibly think there could be at least 3 female leaders running for prime minister.
3
Yeah.
You're hopeful.
Yeah. No, I see it.
in 2023 or this year?
2023. Yeah.
I might agree with you, and I think that would be fantastic to see.
Hello. Oh, you're there. Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay, I thought you had a different thought. Or you were continuing on. To continue just quickly with the NDP in Alberta, I feel part of the problem is that their name was the NDP. You were right, you were associated with a group of people that were anti-pipeline. I will never forget watching the Leap Manifesto debate and a gentleman actually sitting on the microphone and telling Albertans that it doesn't matter if you are basically employed, it's who gives a rat's ass, was basically his message. Do you see the Alberta NDP looking at the possibility of separating from the federal NDP? Deirdre and I had this conversation last time we were together.
I said it would be the biggest failure to launch if they didn't, and I still stand by that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that you saw Notley come out very strongly against that. She was very, 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 very clear in how she saw things, and I think that's the problem with the federal NDP is that they generally don't shift to the way that people are thinking, and to people who. And I made this argument the other day on Twitter: is that economic instability is the ultimate thing that loses progressive people votes.
Yeah.
This is exactly the reason why Trump won. This is exactly the reason why Jason Kenney won, why Doug Ford won, why the Conservatives won in PEI, why they won in Quebec, why they won all across Canada. Because people, when you are worried about your job, you don't care about anything else. That is your concern, is your job and having someone who can speak for you and speak to you. And I'm sorry, like, I have Naomi Klein's books all up in my bookshelf, but Naomi Klein and Ari Lewis telling me what to do when they are millionaires is a little bit difficult for me to take.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's which then will lead me to the Alberta Party. So, I one of the things that I thought would happen, and not necessarily because of Stephen Mandel, I felt to me that the Alberta Party was doing its utmost best to stay away from the polarization. I thought people like Karen McPherson, Greg Clark, Gar, and so many others were just above the fray. I thought that the filming, specifically of Gar's campaign video, was some of the best stuff that I saw in this campaign. It was just top quality, top notch. That I really did think that they would make a breakthrough in terms of seats. They brought in Rick Fraser, and I honestly thought he would win his seat as well. What happened?
Do you want to go first, Deidre?
Sure. What happened was that the UCP and the NDP both were, they had a lot of success getting their message of a vote for any other party is a vote for the party you don't want to win. It was very polarized, and people were very concerned. Those who wanted the NDP out really wanted the NDP out. I mean, look at Greg Clark. I don't think there is anyone in the Alberta legislature, almost in Alberta over the last 4 years, who would have anything negative to say about Greg Clark's term. If anything, most people laud him because he did such an amazing job. I'm of the belief that the only reason he lost in his riding is because the NDP scared people enough to not vote for Greg. The UCP scared people enough not to vote for Greg, and that's how it worked out.
Well, and I think too, like, to be very blunt, I think that the onus of this falls on the people who chose to kick Greg Clark out of leadership, because it should not ever have been Stephen Mandel. That was a very, very, very bad choice from old school and I say this as an old school PCer, old school PC people who chose Stephen Mandel to lead that leadership and basically kick Greg Clark out. That was not okay. That was not a good decision.
Okay, let me challenge you back here, because according to Alberta Party people, it was Greg Clark that decided that he would not be the guy that could get the Alberta Party to the next step.
That's not accurate.
Correct me if I'm wrong, was this discussed on a couple podcasts ago, Deirdre?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
One of Greg Clark's strengths is that he is a policy wonk.
That's very true, yeah.
Absolutely loves policy. The other thing about Greg Clark is he absolutely loves being with his family. So you add those two things to also being a provincial leader who needs to build the party. And, well, 2 out of 3 in that case were not conducive for him to be the leader that the Alberta Party needed to be. And I think on some level, he understood that. And I do think there was strategy behind all of it. Yes, a leadership race would, build
old school. The problem is that old school PC people came into the party and decided that this is what they thought should happen, and this is what did happen, and it was a mistake.
And I think too, there was a hope for certain people to become involved, to run for the leadership.
Yes.
Is there? Are you referring to a certain mayor in a certain city in the southern part of Alberta?
Not necessarily, but
it was all these people. It was Ryan Jesperson. It was this constant idea of who could run and couldn't. But the reality is that the PC party, old school PC party people, took over the Alberta Party, decided who they thought should be the best person to run, and that's what they did. And they ran it with old school PC people. And that's not what this province wants.
No.
End of the day, like, there's a lot of things that came out of the Alberta Party that was great. And I liked a lot of the stuff that they came out with. Just like I liked a lot of the stuff that David Kahn came out with.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to run somebody who's going to be efficient at delivering your message. And Stephen Mandel was not that person. He was not that person a year ago. And he's not that person now.
So I'm going to throw a scenario out to you. This is going to sound ridiculous, but it may lead to something. What are the percentages? Just out of theory, this is maybe a hot take, but I'm gonna toss it out there. What if Rachel Notley was the leader of the Alberta Party?
I think that would be a little bit sticky because she is as branded NDP as NDP branded themselves Rachel Notley. So I think that would be difficult. But one of the things that happened during the 2019 election, which was actually very cool, is that there were 14 races that could have been won by another candidate if votes didn't go to the Alberta Party. So 14 close races, close enough. But in those 14, exactly 7 of them went to the UCP and 7 of them went to the NDP. So the interesting thing that I find with that is that people, in a way, shared, right? That it really placed the Alberta Party, I think, right where they have been trying to say that they are. They're right in the center, and they also increased their vote count by like a huge amount. And one of the things, although a lot of people will say that Mandel was not the person to lead, my mom only follows politics now. She used to follow it all the time. I have a very good knowledge of what happened in Alberta politics between, 1980 and 2015, not because I was paying attention, because I was ignoring it purposefully. But my mom would call me and talk about it constantly. So I have this knowledge of things that went on, and she stopped paying attention, which is fine. But she even said, she's like, I heard that the former mayor of Edmonton became the leader of the Alberta Party. She said, that's a coup. So for people who didn't follow politics, suddenly they thought that was a good thing. And to look at, who else was running for the leadership, love Cara Levis to absolute pieces. Rick Fraser, I didn't know him before he became an Alberta Party MLA, but a great amount of respect for him as well. But again, they were both in Calgary. The Alberta Party needed to get out of Calgary. And they did. So they may not, it was a disappointing, it was disappointing for Alberta Party supporters, but you can look at the gains that the Alberta Party made in this election, and no matter what you think of the leader or the job that he did, the Alberta Party gained a lot out of this election.
I guess from my perspective, I would argue that, yes, they gained a significant amount, but also that was based on individual candidates. So you talk about Gargar, you talk about all these people, Greg Clark, it was based on them. Also, their campaign videos were amazing.
They really were.
Yeah.
They were fantastic.
It was like the best things I've ever seen. So I think that we have to also acknowledge that people in this province don't want and have never had a two-party system. Mm-hmm. That's not how we work. So we want something that operates for both of us. And I think that the Alberta Party has to sit back and think about their leadership and what they want and how they want to see this province represented, because I don't think Steve Mandel is the best person to do that.
Not necessarily names, but what's the type of person that can lead this party?
Don Iveson.
Doug Griffiths.
Oh,
I know you didn't want names.
Yes.
Right? You need someone who is, I would say, probably between 40 and 45. That's kind of your sweet spot where they still manage to have that father type to them, but they need to be able to speak to younger voters. The Alberta Party is 100% for the next generation of Albertans. Like the people that were involved in it, the people that were working on it, those, it was always in mind of the next generation. I would say 100% of their policies were thinking about the next generation. So they need a leader who 100% embodies that. Someone who can bridge.
They also need to unite with the Alberta Liberals. Let's be honest, in Alberta, nobody is ever going to vote for a party with Liberal in their title. No. That's just never going to happen.
Oh, come on, they got 16,000 votes.
Oh!
I'm not kidding. That was their provincial total.
Huge. So, David Kahn had so many great ideas, and I like him so much. But I think that they have to understand that at this point they have to merge, because we're looking at a place where we need a center-left concept for all of us. And we also need one that is not necessarily damaged with the Liberal heading. Mm-hmm. And oh God, I want a provincial sales tax so bad I can taste it.
There's a few people that have floated that idea of the provincial sales tax, and it's a hard sell in this province, but
I don't think it's as hard as you think it is.
It is hard, because the problem is in Alberta, we do not want to accept that we are not special, unique little snowflakes. That's the problem that we have, is we do not want to accept that we cannot live in this resource bubble our whole lives. We can't do that. That's not the way we operate. That's not the way we will ever operate again. But we have to accept that we need a new resource revenue source. Yeah. And it's not going to be pipelines. It's not going to be anything else. This is what we have to do. But we are not there yet emotionally.
I think,
as weird as that sounds.
I think you're getting there, though. I think that there was conversation even when Prentice delivered his final budget. That I remember conservatives saying it's time for us to have a conversation around a provincial sales tax. So I think that maybe that was one of Notley's big mistakes. I think Notley should have put that on the table, because I don't know, it would have created an interesting debate. I think that there's some people open to the idea of a provincial sales tax. I think that there are some people that are recognizing that Alberta at times acts like the people that they're mostly angry at, Quebec. And there is a sense of this entitlement. And I think that they realize that a provincial sales tax can get the economy moving, and they come from places like here in BC, Ontario, and every other province that has a provincial sales tax, and they see how it has helped.
And hasn't gone under economically? Are you sure? Because I think that's still the narrative here.
Yeah.
I mean, does it take work? Is it gonna? Of course it does. I'm not saying that the majority of people are going to be going for it.
It's an ego ticket. So we cannot, as a province, accept that we don't get to live on these boom times all the time. That's the problem, is that we don't want to accept that. And a provincial sales tax is basically accepting that.
Yeah. And I also think the conversation around finding a way to, and Notley sort of talked about this, but she didn't talk about this enough, is the idea of diversifying the economy and finding other ways to create income.
One of my biggest takeaways from the failure of the NDP government, they had sales tax in their platform until 2015. They should have brought that in. It would have been a huge opportunity for them to do that, and they could have won had we had that. They did not because they were afraid. They brought in a lot of things that didn't make sense, but they did that.
PST in Alberta stands for Political Suicide Tax.
I know, and this is why I don't understand. It makes me so sad. I like it so much.
No, one of the things that that Ralph Klein, who I'm not a fan of,
what?
He created buy-in. Because when he became premier in 1993, the corporate tax was 6%. He raised it by over 100% to 12.4%.
Mm-hmm.
He said, your tax is going to pay down the debt. There was an 8% surcharge on personal taxes, and people paid it because it was going to pay down the debt. He created buy-in for these additional taxes, and then he went insane. And actually, that sounds wrong considering what happened, but I meant it facetiously. But it can be done. But you need someone who's able to actually create that buy-in. He did it. He did pay down the debt. That was the other thing, right? He actually said, I'm going to do this with this money, and I did it. And then he cut all that stuff out, right? He started to cut down the corporate tax. By the time that it reached a top of 14.5%. So he didn't just stop at 12.4. He kept increasing it because he needed money to pay down the debt. But he had the buy-in from Albertans. He was elected, that was up until, so that was 93. He was elected twice.
2006.
Is that when we started? That was when we got the road flags.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was 12 years. 12. I think the corporate tax started to come down before that, but it started to come down in 2000. But it only came down 1% the first year, and then another percent until it got to 10. But the thing is, he said he was going to do it, and he did. So it can be done. Somebody can create buy-in, but they actually might have to try. And we haven't seen that.
So
because it's political suicide, apparently.
So what do you think happens with the carbon tax?
It's done. I think Kenny is going to get rid of the provincial carbon tax. And then at that point, what we see is this kind of weird dance with the federal government as to whether or not we take on their carbon tax or not. He said he's going to have a court challenge. I think that ultimately the reality is we need to find a way as a government, as a country, as a province to deal with carbon pollution. And just having high tax on people, on the high tax emitters, that's not enough. And I think that Kenny will find a way in which that works for him. But it won't be through a carbon tax, because for a lot of people that has been consistently neglected. And you look at the provincial results in Alberta, in Ontario, in Manitoba, in New Brunswick, in PEI, clearly that's something that people don't want.
Yeah, I think that's going to lead that maybe will lead us to the federal sort of where we're at federally here, because as mentioned a little bit earlier, PEI elected a conservative minority government. Ontario elected Doug Ford within the last year. Saskatchewan has gone conservative. Manitoba's gone conservative. We're pretty much, except two provinces now, in a conservative mode, except out here in BC. We have an NDP Green coalition, and one other province does not, off the top of my head here. What does this look like in terms of the federal? Does this impact what we're going to see federally? It is, in translation here, after everything that has happened so far in 2019, the first 120 days or so of Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals, 2019, are they in trouble coming October?
I'll say this. I think the worst thing that can happen to Jason Kenney is a Andrew Scheer majority government. If they win a majority government, what does he have to fight against? At that point, he has nothing. If you can't fight pipelines against them, if you can't fight carbon tax against them, what do you do? And I think that is a point where he has to actually decide at what point he's going to stop fighting the federal government and actually leading the province of Alberta.
That is interesting because they're,
You'd think that Scheer could be a good thing for Kenney?
I think that would be. I think Scheer would actually be different for him.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Just like Harper was no cakewalk for
Prentice or Redford. How many families did we have? 5.
I thought it was 4. 4. It could have. No, I think it was only 4.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, the worst thing that could possibly happen to Jason Kenney is Andrew Scheer wins.
Well, I also think, you talked about Notley's concession speech earlier in this. I think Kenney's concession speech, what bothered me most about Kenney's concession speech is it felt like he was running for Prime Minister, not Premier of Alberta.
Because he is.
Well, but also I think that what we need to understand is that this is a typical conservative perspective. You run to the right, you govern from the center.
Yeah.
And that's what Harper did. He is following the Harper model to the extreme. You do everything you can to be a center government because do you think that for 1 second Jason Kenney wants to be a one-term premier? No.
I don't think Jason Kenney will last one term because he's headed to Ottawa.
I
right
think
after Scheer loses the election.
I think he wants at least one term because you don't want anything other than that because that makes you a failure. And Jason Kenney hasn't failed once. Not once.
And he won't fail. He won't fail if he leaves Alberta to run as for the federal leadership.
I mean, or is as my dream exists, he will give it to Rona Ambrose.
They'd have better luck with that, in my opinion.
I love her so much.
Yeah, see, I sidetrack here. Well, we're on kind of I see a Rona Ambrose or a Michelle Rempel leading. If Andrew Scheer does not win, I see a Rona Ambrose or Michelle Rempel leading the Conservatives.
I don't think Michelle Rempel could at this point. I think you see Lisa Raitt, who's been a significantly more moderate influence on the party. She would be the better choice. Okay,
fair. Okay, but I think right now my point really is, and I understand that people don't like Michelle Rempel. I don't have as much of a problem with her as other people do. I just think she just speaks her mind, and that's her, and she does her thing. But I do think that there is some really strong conservative women leaders right now that do have an opportunity to, I think, maybe a better chance than Andrew Scheer of taking the government to the conservative government to government.
Well, you say that, but I don't know if you've seen the polls. The polls show that they will do much better than you think. The polls right now are showing a Conservative Party minority government.
I don't know if that is as much because people really like Andrew Scheer or just people are just turned off of Justin Trudeau.
Does it matter?
People are turned off of Justin Trudeau. Yeah, right now, people are thinking that Trudeau is just like every other government and he has time to turn that around before the next election, but I would rather see him step down and someone else run that election, because if you look at the federal numbers, so the number of votes that come in over, I guess, before 2015, there was not a significant increase in votes for as a whole. Yet what happened was we kept going from liberal to conservative to liberal to conservative. It's the same people. The same people switch their votes. You've got your diehards, who are never going to vote for anyone else, but then you've got that center who's like, okay, you know what, you've had enough. We're going to do something else. And so it's generally the same people who are voting. And right now, Trudeau has pissed them off. Now, as much as I would love to see him step down, I have a feeling he won't. And I honestly still have a feeling that he can win, because Andrew Scheer is, I don't know, Mr. Yokel next door. He's not prime minister material.
Yeah, I don't think people see Andrew Scheer as a prime minister. Yeah. I think they see Andrew Scheer as a really nice guy who likes the Saskatchewan Roughriders and is really polite.
And who could be the prime minister's right-hand man.
Yeah, but not the actual prime minister. No. And I think that the Trudeau, I don't think even from the political left to the political right, you look at everything that he has presented and what he has done, you cannot, even the most diehard of Trudeau supporters cannot come out of this 4 years and say that he can give him a passing grade. He bumbled Trans Mountain. He bumbled the Trans Mountain. He absolutely fumbled that. No matter which way you look at that, he fumbled it.
This is the part that you don't understand, is that there is, again, this is the problem with social media, the problem with a lot of the way that people see things, is you have hyper-partisans who do not believe what you were saying. And what you were saying is just like sacrosanct, and they will not listen to it. So we, again, have no room for discussion on this stuff, because either you love him or you hate him, and there's no room in between.
Okay, but even just from sitting here in BC, in terms of some of the issues that he promised in BC, the people that were opposed to the pipeline, the Trans Mountain pipeline, I think they felt alienated because of how he's handled it. Of course, the pro-pipeline people are going to already say that. How the pot issue has been handled. It's like there is a lot of cannabis supporters that are really confused by what exactly this law is. So a lot of the things that he promised out here in BC, he never came through, not even a little bit. And I do think what happened.
I would expect that what you will see is in the federal election, he will come forward with those promises, because he knows his Alberta votes are done.
I don't know what he has. I mean, he could. I think it's going to be very.
We elected 4 Liberal MPs, 2 in Calgary, 2 in Edmonton, plus 1 NDP MP in Edmonton.
Yeah, but
and I think that we probably see, this is my prediction, Randy Boissonnault is the only one who potentially wins his seat.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I just
Randy Boissonnault.
Okay.
Although I think he might be in trouble too. I think he's gonna be in for a tough time.
Oh yeah, he will be. But I think that we need to start having discussions about what that looks like, because as a province, if we have nobody who actually speaks for our values, what do we do then?
Fair.
So I think that Linda Duncan leaving is a huge vacuum, because what people forget is that was a conservative seat for a long time. That wasn't always a guaranteed NDP seat. So it could go conservative. So we have to have conversations now in this city, in this province, around what we want and what we want to see and who we want to see at the table and what matters to us. And to also understand that maybe jobs and the economy and pipelines need to be something that we talk about. Because the second that progressives just stop talking about those things is when we start losing.
Yeah.
So I guess, let's maybe, I think that was kind of what I was thinking a little bit about last night too, when I haven't had a chance to really dig into all the numbers of the PEI election here, but there does seem to be, I did see a lot of conservative pundits say that this was the momentum that they were having right now, in terms of they feel like this is the opportunity that they're going to get Trudeau or whatever. But what it was not only that, I guess I started to think, what are the Conservatives doing to win, and where are the Progressives missing their mark? And you think it's partly because they're not talking about job economy pipelines or economic issues?
For me, and this is my perspective, I think that what we have seen consistently, and I got into arguments with people on Twitter about this recently, is that, like, when you don't talk to people who are feeling economically insecure, you lose across the board. Like, you see that with Trump. And the reason why Trump won is he spoke to people who have been losing their jobs and felt not seen within some sort of policy framework for a long time. And we have to start talking about what that looks like. And how do we give these people, when we talk about coal plants shutting down, we talk about all these different industries shutting down, and we look at Calgary that is at an unemployment high that is unbelievable. How do we talk to those people? As progressives, how do we do that? How do we do that better so that they vote the way that we want them to vote, so that they see themselves in our plan? And they did not.
No, and that was absolutely a campaign fail. But I saw a tweet that was so full of self-pity that my initial response was, that I just wanted to mock the crap out of it. But at the end of the tweet, what they said was, how does it feel to be irrelevant? That's how you made 1 million Albertans feel over the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, was it in a nutshell. These people felt as if they were not being represented. And, and I look back at not least 4 years, and I look back at her trying to be optimistic about the economy. I honestly think that they did the best job that they could.
Yep.
She tried to stay optimistic, and in a lot of cases that would work. Because it was an NDP government, it didn't. And I don't think it had anything to do with the job they were doing, because they did get investment. They did entice investment into Alberta. But one of the problems is that is the investment that was coming into the province is not going to help a majority of these 18 to 24-year-olds who can't find work. Because the software companies, the digital engineering, the AI boom over in Edmonton, because Google was like, okay, we'll put our AI headquarters where you want to be, and you want to be in Edmonton. That's fantastic. It's also extremely scary for a bunch of people who have no idea how they can succeed in this new economy. It doesn't change the fact that this is the new economy. I spent 4 years career planning with junior and senior high school students. And one of the videos that we would show would say that we are educating students for jobs that don't even exist yet. When you want to get down to it, that's a scary thought. How are we possibly educating people for jobs that don't exist? But I actually did see, and I wish I could remember who it was, but someone did an interview, and they said, just because, like, think of the, we had so many more people involved in agriculture before the Industrial Revolution. And once the Industrial Revolution hit, well, then there were different jobs, right? So people did make that transition. But Alberta, and this, I believe, is a fault of the former PC governments, because as a career coach, as a career planner, these were things that I actually paid attention to. What jobs are available? What is what's the labor market look like? What is the government saying? What are we putting money into? Things like that. You know what? It was oil. That was it. That was the only thing we were talking about. They weren't diversifying the economy, and they weren't in any hurry to do so. So what happened in 2015, other than this U-shaped downturn that Prentice knew was going to be a U-shape? Other than that, we were faced with a brand new government, and a government who obviously understood what Alberta had not been doing. And they started to make change. They changed what they were looking for to diversify the economy. They made all of these changes that people are not prepared for.
Well, and I think just building off of that, like we talk about this like Prentice moment of talking look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like that is something that is inherently negative that he did, but that's true. Like that's exactly something that we had to do. We talk about Redford, the bitumen bubble. Like people tried to tell us for a very, 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 very long time what this was going to look like. But the reality is that you have a lot of people who are out of work. You have a lot of people who are angry, and they want to feel heard. And the problem is that again and again and again, progressive governments do not listen to them. They minimize them. They minimize their experiences. They say, you can get retrained, you can go somewhere else. Like, you're talking to people who can't make their house payments. That is
50 years old.
Exactly. Those are the exact people who voted UCP in this election. So I think we need to have a conversation about how, as progressives, we speak to that group of people. Because you watch it in the States, you watch it everywhere else, and there is no ability for us to speak to them. And what's ironic is that the progressives are supposed to be the people who speak to those ones. The ones who are economically hurting, who are having a hard time. Like, that should be our jam. And we can't do that anymore at all. And we lose again and again and again and again and again because we do not know how to have those conversations. Jason Kenney spoke to those people. And the 71% vote out. That's why they won 55%. And sad and don't know what to do, and they felt that Jason Kenney was speaking for them when maybe the program did narrow a little bit.
And I think you can also look at how Jason Kenney spent the last 2 years doing. He was traveling the province. He was going to like small group events that were set up by supporters, and he was talking directly to people.
Yep.
And that is something that, I mean, look at what the Wild Rose did, what Derek Fildebrandt did when Bill 6 was passed. He organized the crap out of his riding and O'Neill Carr, and they had 300 or 400 people show up to hear about Bill 6. About their concerns, I think. But they had a lot of people. It had to do with some of that organizing. It had to do with where they were comfortable rather than asking people to come to them. They needed to show up in the coffee houses in every small town in this province and say, how can we help? And that didn't happen.
They talked over them instead of to them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it was purposeful, but I can just look at what Jason Kenney did on his Unite Alberta tour, and I can say that is what people needed. They needed to have the leader of the party standing in front of them saying, or, at that time he was just the potential leader, but still, He was in their towns. He was in their coffee shops. He was talking directly to them, to face. And that was the opportunity that was missed by the NDP. That's the only thing I can think of that might have made a difference.
Which leads to the conversation on social media. This is going to be a tough. This will be tough because I think some people, if they're when they're listening to this, are going to feel a little bit of angst and anger. But I think we do need to have this conversation. I think one of the things that I think was also a huge turnoff, and I want to precurse this. I do think that I forget I'm going to mispronounce the journalist's last name that wrote the article about racism in Edmonton. It's Omar Moulon. Yeah. I think that there was a no. Is that how you pronounce that?
What you're talking about?
Yeah. I think that that was a very valuable and a very important piece. And I do think that there is something I think very much needed to explore there. I think the concern with some of the people associated with Jason Kenney and the UCP party is a very valid conversation. I think some of the people that have ended up being a part of the Yellow Vest movement, I think, yes, there's some very uncomfortable things happening in Alberta. But I also think that there is...
To be fair, they're also happening across Canada.
Yes, they are.
There just happens to be more of them in Alberta.
Yeah.
Well, I think what I'm very tired of seeing is this connection to the UCP. Somehow within Jason Kenney and the UCP government that this is a thing. And I think that we really need to take a moment and step back and realize that we're talking about what's happening. We're talking about primarily what's happening within Edmonton. So it's ironic that now we've decided to blame this on the UCP when Edmonton actually went completely NDP.
No, Edmonton South.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, without Casey Madu.
And some of the races, the races weren't generally tight, but 7 of those, Castle Downs, Decore, McClung, South.
Fair, that's very fair. But I think that we need to talk about is that this isn't a party thing. This isn't about the UCP or the NDP. This is about a problem that we need to acknowledge across the board.
Yeah,
we need to address it. And I got really annoyed because this guy from Sportsnet was like, 12 racists is not a big deal.
Yeah.
Is 13 okay? Is 14 okay? We need to talk about this. And I think that we have to do what we consistently have to do, and what is problematic sometimes within our current political environment is you call people in, you don't call them out. When you want to talk about these things, want to get political buy-in, telling somebody they're a white supremacist is not going to get them to have the conversation with you.
Well, and this is the part that I think I want to address, because I think that all of this is really important to discuss. But I think the other part, the struggle here is, I know that there were some people that I value as friends that vote UCP, and I know them quite well. And I would not be labeling these folks under any white supremacist, racist, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And the struggle here is, how do we have this conversation that is a very important and legitimate conversation and not label every single person that voted the UCP as an anti-gay, racist person? And I know that there were people on Twitter that have said, if you voted this way, this is what you have voted for and this is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
How do we unpack that conversation?
That's actually a really tough one, because...
It's probably another podcast.
You could go about this for a while. Because on the one hand, you know, there's people who say, well, okay, let's say in Mark Smith's riding, you would definitely have some people who say, I'm not homophobic. I don't have a problem with gay people. But yes, I voted for Mark Smith. And how can you reconcile that? And possibly, like, I've kind of decided that, you know, some of the people that have come out saying, yes, I voted UCP. No, I'm not a racist. No, I'm not this. Okay, that's fantastic. So how do you reconcile that with the fact that you voted for a party that had all of these problems? How do you reconcile that? And that's honestly that's what I want to see from conservatives. What I want to hear from them is, I voted for the economy and I do not support this. And I'm going to buy a membership and I'm going to, you know, write my MLA and I'm going to write the leader of the party and I'm going to say, this is not acceptable. These candidates, these views, I do not support. And you need to do something about that before the next election or you will not have my vote. Like, honestly, that's what I want to see from these UCP voters. I don't want your excuse of I'm not that way, but I did vote for these candidates or I did vote for this party that has this problem. I want to know what you're going to do about it, because they're not going to listen to, actually, well, I am a member, but they're not going to listen to, you know, the NDP opposition hounding them about this. They're going to listen to their members. And if those members are the ones that show up to the convention and vote on the policies, maybe we won't have Rick McIver standing up next convention saying, please don't make us the Lake of Fire party again. Because there will be enough people there that don't support that. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to hear from these people, because you're right. They're not all racist and they're not all bigots. So what are you going to do about it? That's what I want to know. That's my soapbox.
I literally have nothing to add to that. You know, I grew up in this party. As a kid, I've been in this party my whole life. I've campaigned for this party my whole life.
Which part of the party?
The PC party.
Yeah.
Right. So the PC party has been my life, my whole life. And it is very difficult to watch everything that's happened for the last little while. It's hard knowing that I love people who have been elected. Like, Leila here is probably one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met my whole life. There are people that you watch getting elected and you watch these things and you grow up that way, and it's very difficult to, I think, you want to see the better angels of people's nature. And what this party should and could be is something that is fiscally conservative and socially moderate. That's what I want. That's what I want. I don't understand why they opened up things around Bill 24. That was completely pointless. I don't know why they did any of that. I don't know why this is a conversation that we had to have in this province in 2019. So that is very, very, very frustrating, I think, for a lot of us, because I want to support them. I want to vote for them. That's what I want. I didn't. In 2019, I voted for my NDP MLA. And I did that because I believe that he is the absolute best representative for the area in which I live in. So what they have to do is bring all of us on side. Ultimately, if they want to be more than one-term party, bring us on side. Bring all of the social non-conservatives on side.
But they were purged happily, remember?
They weren't completely, though, because if you look now at some of the people that are working with them, like Christine Myatt is not a social conservative. Katie Merrifield is not a social conservative. You have people in that party now who are showing you that, again, he's going by the Harvard playbook. You campaign to the right, you legislate to the center.
And yeah, I'm optimistic about what I've seen in the last 8 days. I'm encouraged.
He's been better than he has been a long time.
Yeah. Oh, because the last 2 years, I mean, you were honestly, many of us who were concerned about a Kenney government were concerned because of 2 years of campaigning and what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look good. So this, like I said, I'm optimistic. I'm encouraged, and I think I put out a post this morning that basically said I'm ready to move on, and I'm ready to give this government a chance, and that because he's changed the way that he's speaking, he's changed reactions. I don't love it because I also look at how it was campaigned the last 2 years, and I don't know which Jason Kenney to trust. But I'm over the election, and I'm absolutely ready to move forward. And I want people to try and give this government a chance, because that was the biggest complaint from the NDP supporters, is how much people dug their heels in and said they would not support this government when the NDP won. So, I mean, I want to try and use whatever my platform is to try and encourage people to not do that, because it's not beneficial for anyone. And you know what? It's a short leash. I'm not going to start making excuses if he suddenly goes back on a bunch of things. If he starts giving us a reason to be afraid, then, that chance is gone. But I'm willing to give it right now.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is basically is challenge, but still support where you can.
Right. And that's the thing, is that we have an opportunity or an obligation as not supporting the party to continue to hold that government to account, and to do it in a way that isn't just whining on social media.
So I think I talked a lot about this a couple days ago around not my premier hashtag. And we have a responsibility as conservatives to be not what we were 4 years ago. That stuff around the coup d'etat, all that shit, that's not what we want to be.
No. Oh gosh.
Oh God, no. And I think a lot of people in Alberta fall between both parties. They don't necessarily support the NDP. They don't necessarily support the UCP. So let's work together to make sure that those people can have a good province and they can have things that they want. And let's work together. And if you don't like what they're doing, call them to account. Call them to account. But don't do it in a way that mirrors the same thing that 4 years ago you hated.
Right.
Yeah. I read what you were trying to say is exactly look, I don't think it wasn't great for people to stand against Notley and declare it was not my premier in 2015 and behave a certain way, and it's not okay now. And I know that people were challenging you and saying, well, where did you call that out back in 2015? Let us explore all of the tweets from 2015 to see what exactly was said here. And who are you taking pictures with, young lady? And I took it to mean let's try to raise the level of conversation here. Is what I'm hearing both of you say is let's absolutely, if Jason Kenney is doing something offside, then we need to challenge that and debate that and passionately defend those that are not feeling represented. We haven't got into this podcast yet that there's only one openly LGBT MLA sitting MLA at this point in time. There is a sense that some are going to feel very underrepresented, and I think I'm hearing from all of you. It's okay to challenge that, but acting like a douche canoe is not going to help it.
That's right.
Yeah, but I think also this is actually one of the most respectful conversations that I've seen. Like, you have a lot of these conversations online, and it ends with, like, oh, you're a fascist, or you're a socialist. Like, it never goes well. Social media is not the place to have conversations with nuance. It just isn't. Like, I would love to think that we could do that, but it's not.
Someone once told me that that my ability to suffer fools should be an elective.
Mm-hmm. I was once told that I was Jason Kenney's secret girlfriend, so we all have things that we've experienced online.
Wow. There's some people that are questioning if Jason there's some people have questions about who's Jason Kenney is dating, like it's their business. But
it's toast me, just so you all know.
But I thought it was Joe Clark.
I think what's important is that what I really appreciate, and like I'm just gonna give like a moment to like girl crush on Deidre. We don't agree on a lot of things, but yet what I love about her, what I've always loved about her, what I think is incredible about her voice, is that we have conversations about things, and we have reasonable, very kind conversations about things. And I think that is a model for how we should all be. Because at the end of the day, the next 4 years are going to be hard. A lot of people who are progressive, who believe in progressive values, are not going to have a very easy time with this current government, whether or not they interact with what you think they're going to do or they don't. But at the end of the day, it's about interacting with people. And I follow Deidre not because like I agree with her sometimes, because I don't, but because she makes me a better person. She makes me a better human being by following the things she says and listening to what she says and looking at how I think about things and changing my perspective. And I feel like that's so very important, that we have to acknowledge that like conservative, liberal, however you think about things, the people around you are going to make you a better person. Period.
Thank you, Kristin.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, let's leave it there. I feel like that's a good place to end it.
And like, follow people you don't agree with. That's the one thing I'm going to just like yell about before we go. Follow people you don't agree with. Because I think that I have been made a better human being by following people I don't agree with.
Yeah. I follow from various different perspectives myself, and I'm exploring what they have.
And to be clear, I don't mean like weird partisan people. I mean people who think differently.
Yeah.
And I want to take a moment as an acknowledgement to people like Bridget Casey. Bridget Casey and I disagree on a lot of things, but she's this incredible voice around her own experience, around childcare, around the things that matter to her. And my God, she hasn't made my life significantly better. And I think that we all have to do that. We all have to take a moment to follow somebody that we don't align with and let ourselves be challenged.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are you guys up to next?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm still going to get my daily kickstarts. I recorded one late last night, but it was after midnight, so I actually scheduled it for tomorrow, which will effectively make it old news. So that was fun. I do the daily kickstarts in the morning, or at least I'm trying to get there. Technology's not my friend.
What are the daily kickstarts? Sorry.
So it's under 10 minutes of, what kind of happened the day before and where that might lead us. I've done a few for subscribers. It's a half an hour. So I stop at 7 minutes. Everybody gets that. If you're a subscriber, then you get the full half hour. And we go into more detail about whatever I was talking about. And yeah, Robbie and I just did a podcast last night. So I think we're good for at least a week. We're kind of on hold here in Alberta because until Jason Kenney announces his cabinet, there's not a whole lot that we can really talk about in Alberta politics. Like, we're all just kind of waiting. We're still all talking about the election because that's all we've got right now.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I don't think much will be happening until next week.
Fair. Kristin, what do you got going on?
Oh God, nothing. I am currently trying to become a darts champion. I am in a corporate challenge for darts, and I don't really do like physical activity or any kind of like sporting related activity, so that's really taking a lot of my time. But I also want to take a moment before I finish to talk about something that's super important to me.
Yes.
So, in October, when our federal government is done, what happens also at that point is that they kill every bill that's sitting in the Senate. So that includes Bill C-337, which is the bill to train judges on sexual violence. This bill has been sitting in the Senate for 2 years, and nothing has happened. So it hasn't gone anywhere. It was passed with unanimous consent in the House, and it's been sitting for 2 years. So I would just really like to take this moment to ask anybody listening to this to please, please, please go on to the justact.ca to read about it, and then write your senator, write your MLA, your MP, and please, please help us make sure that this bill passes.
Okay. Yes, we will be talking about that again, I'm sure, for sure, at some point in time. For myself, I just, before we recorded this, just dropped the Avengers Endgame preview podcast, which is opening tomorrow. The biggest, probably at least top 2 movies that are going to be this year that are Star Wars. You can take your pick. We are going to do a spoiler-filled review this weekend, so we're going to unpack it. What happened? Are we disappointed, etc. We're also going to be talking about mental health in the election, just from the perspective of also the people that felt that they lost something, and also from the perspective of people that think that because the government who they voted for, having expectations around that. So we're going to talk around that a little bit with Alicia Perot, who wrote the book Taming Crazy. We're also going to be talking about supporting a social media, I don't want to say icon, but a pillar in the Calgary social media community. Mitch Polochek has been going through some difficult times. We're going to continue to get some support for him. And, of course, we've got our hockey podcast. It will be on Saturday as we are speaking the sports scenes, and the sports scenes are tied at 3 going into a second overtime. So we've got that. Where do we follow you guys?
I'm at Mitchell_AB.
And Kristin?
And I'm at KRSTINRAWORTH.
All right, and I am at KVOLE. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that people that are listening to it take it for what it is. I think this is a really important conversation, and I really thank you guys for jumping on and doing this, and thank everyone for listening.
Thank you for having me.
And we will talk soon. Bye for now.
Bye.